Hey, thank you so much, Chair, and aloha, everyone. It's great to be on this hearing today. And as a pilot, a lifelong pilot, I'm really excited about some of the really innovative things that we're talking about. And my first question goes to Mr. Scholl from Boom, and I had a great opportunity to read your testimony, and I had something that popped out of me, and I wanted to ask you a question on. You mentioned in your testimony that Overture, the supersonic aircraft, which looks very similar to the Concorde, but obviously from your testimony, there's um, much greater technological advancement in this type of aircraft. But you noted that the Overture will, due to noise, would only fly supersonic speeds over the water. And so my question was, that makes a lot of sense when you're flying from New York to London or Japan to Hawaii, but how would that work flying from Los Angeles to New York if we're limited to flying right under the speed of sound?
Great question. Really appreciate it. The reality is we're going to see supersonic travel coming to market in a couple phases. And that first phase is to be focused on supersonic flight over water. So fortunately, Hawaii is one of those places that super benefit from it, since right in the middle of a lot of water. But of course, we want to get from say Seattle to Washington D.C. faster than we get from Seattle to Tokyo. And so there's going to be, I think, a second generation here, possibly some supersonic corridors that would allow high-speed flight over land. And then what we really need to have this be mainstream everywhere is global standards for supersonic flight over land, understanding what's going to be an acceptable level of noise over communities that doesn't create disruption. And then once we have those standards, once we have that certainty, we know we can build aircraft that meet it, but we can't do that in phase one because we don't know what we need to do. So it's that regulatory certainty that's really the holding it back.
All right, thank you for that. Second question is in regards to the SAF reductions in carbon emissions and the types of fuels and technology and research we're doing to build aircraft that are more energy efficient, more carbon neutral, and ones that can help us contribute to a cleaner environment. Can you talk a little bit about that part of your testimony and what Boom is doing and Overture is doing to do R&D into that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's super, super important to us. And we believe deeply that the airplane that you most want to be on from a comfort perspective, from a convenience perspective, from a speed perspective, also needs to be the one that's best for the planet. And historically, we've seen those things in conflict, but they really don't need to be. And I think there's great inspiration that we can take from what Tesla has accomplished in automotive. Before Tesla, you didn't want an electric vehicle. They were slow. They didn't go very far. They weren't fun to drive. And then they showed us that we could build an electric car that's great to drive and is best for the planet. And so that's the kind of vision that inspires us in Overture. And so the question is, well, how do you do it? You can't do it with electricity, not anytime soon, because batteries are simply too heavy for a long range flight. You'll run out of charge before you get to your destination. So what you need is sustainable aviation fuel, which is chemically very similar to today's jet fuels, but can come from completely carbon neutral sources. So there are a bunch of ways we can do this. There are biofuels. There are fuels that are based on municipal waste. There are fuels that are based in carbon sequestration. And we're designing Overture from the ground up to be the first commercial airliner that's going to run on 100% SAF. And that's super important to us as a design goal. Now, the biggest challenge, and I think this is where there's a opportunity for this committee and for Congress to provide some leadership, is that the supply chain for sustainable aviation fuel for SAF needs to be scaled. And today, the technologies exist, but they're not scaled up yet. So we need things like producer tax credits, R&D around SAF, and how we scale that so that it is not just technologically feasible, but available in large quantities and available on terms that are economically competitive.
Thank you so much for that. And mahalo, Chair, and I yield back.